We're joined now by 18th Judicial District Attorney George Brauchler, Arapahoe County and surrounding areas. Appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me.
So you've been outspoken recently encouraging Governor Hickenlooper to be more aggressive in issuing clemencies to convicts. Why this issue? Why now?
I think, one, it's an issue that I haven't waited until now to talk about. In fact, with specific reference to Wayne Thomas, who I know that 9 News has done a lot on, I started that process, my gosh, over 2 years ago, maybe the summer of 2014. And it's not that we hadn't had petitions for clemency filed with the governor's office routed to us before, but that was the first one that really struck me as one that made the most sense. I mean, this is a guy that is truly deserving of what I consider to be the pinnacle of clemency, which is a pardon, which is that public forgiveness. And so I've been doing this now for a couple years. It's not the first letter I've written about it. It's not the, I hand-delivered a letter to the governor's office back in November of 2014 after he was reelected, asking for this same outcome. I think what triggered this particular letter at this time was seeing the president and what he had been doing pretty steadily over the last 6 years in terms of clemency. And this last week, I think, in fact, he had had a bunch of commutations and a handful of pardons. And I thought, you know what, why aren't we doing this here in the state of Colorado?
Typically, elected officials will issue pardons on their way out of office. Is that just tradition? Is that CYA? What is that?
I think it's a political courage issue, and I think what happens is you don't have to look too far back in the rearview mirror to see things like Willie Horton, which wasn't even a pardon or commutation. That was just a furlough. Or you look at what happened with Governor Huckabee on someone that he had granted some sort of clemency to. And I think that politicians who put their political careers first sometimes worry about, look, if I do this and I guess wrong, one, I don't want to see anyone else victimized, but two, how is this going to come back to haunt me politically? I think it takes some courage to be more proactive on pardons and clemency earlier in someone's term.
Isn't that easy for you to say? Because it wouldn't be your signature on it, it would be the governor's, it would be his political legacy.
I think it would be easier to say if I hadn't also told the governor's office and put in this latest letter to the Aurora Sentinel the fact that, listen, if you want me on the stage there with you to say the DA agrees with this, if you want me to take that risk with you, I will do it in the case of Wayne Thomas, because I really don't think there's a measurable risk there. I think it's the right thing to do. I think all elected DAs that I know of in this state would do the same thing, and that is they would put their name behind someone they thought was truly deserving of clemency.
You've had a lot of differences of opinion with the governor, but you're saying that you genuinely are interested in providing him cover if he wants to do this. This is not trying to goad him into making an error on this issue or any other.
No, because it would come back to haunt me as well, right? So when I first made this pitch to the governor's office, it was through a phone call to his then counsel way back in the summer of 2014, and I said these exact words: if you want me on the stage with the governor, and I won't have to say a word, I can just give a thumbs up and say this is the right call. If something down the road goes wrong, people are going to focus on this guy too. So yeah, this is a risk I'm willing to take because I don't think it's much of a risk.
You're not just talking about the one case, though. You're talking about clemency and the public forgiveness more broadly. Why do you think the governor has been so reticent to exercise that power? I
don't know. I think if you look back over the political history of Governor Hickenlooper, even going back to the time when he was mayor, this is not an area that he feels like he's got a particular level of expertise or comfort. I mean, he is great with interpersonal relationships. He's great on business matters, things that further the economy. I don't think anybody denies any of those particular things. But he's not strong on criminal justice, never has been, doesn't tout that that's a strong suit for him. And this being a risk anyway, I think is something that it's easier to say, look, we'll wait. The part that concerns me is that we went an entire term of him in office without even having a board for pardons and clemency. All of the appointments that Governor Ritter had previously made were allowed to expire, and we went basically 4 years with what I think are probably hundreds of applications piling up on a desk. I am heartened by the fact that he has made those appointments. They're good people. They're sitting there in earnest going through those files, and I think they've probably made recommendations to him, and I'm encouraging him to act on those.
Do you think that his hesitation might have anything to do with the fact that the one time that he did publicly, intervene on behalf of a convict, Nathan Dunlap, sparing him the death penalty, you were on the steps of the Capitol excoriating him for that? Do you think that might have something to do with his pause?
Maybe, but so what? I mean, first off, we're talking about a convicted mass murderer who was sentenced to death by a jury 17 years earlier that went through the most post-conviction appellate review of any person in the history of this state and had the Supreme Court bless off on the execution of this sentence. He then overrode the will of the jury, overrode all of the appellate process, and didn't say, I'm granting clemency, didn't say, I'm going to allow the execution. He chose to exercise a power, one that he's entitled to exercise, but one that hadn't been exercised since 1895, to create, in essence, a moratorium on the death penalty in Colorado. That's what I was upset about, was the fact that he ripped that scab off of those jurors, off of those victims' psyches, and allowed them to go back out into the wilderness with a sense of no closure, not one way or the other. You can wonder if some future governor someday may come back and give you that closure, but it won't be here. That's what frustrated me.
But bygones be bygones. Governor, please read my letter and look at clemency for some other folks.
I think that each individual case has to be treated individually. And look, you know, politics is a big boy game. And to some extent, when you make decisions, some people are going to be with you. You make other decisions, those same people may be opposed to you. The idea here is that we should be moving forward, trying to get the most justice that we can out of this system for each individual defendant as we move forward. That's what this is about. The Dunlap thing is done, as far as I know, unless he's going to act on that as he leaves office. And frankly, I think there's probably even money that he might. But on this particular case, it has nothing to do with a reprieve. It has nothing to do with a mass murder. This is about a good man who has served his sentence, paid his dues, and exceeded all expectations moving forward. I imagine there's others out there like that.
Do you expect the Governor Hickenlooper and Democrats in the state legislature are going to move on the death penalty in this coming session? They need to convince a Republican or two.
You know, it's funny. I don't know. It's interesting to me that they didn't last year during a re-election year. Like, this is a hot button issue. And I get why it is, because every poll you can name has Coloradans supporting a death penalty by measures of 2-to-1 or 3-to-1 in some cases. So to do it in an off-election year when it can't come back to haunt them in November, they might move on that. I agree with you that it's going to take some Republicans. But if you listen to what the governor said back in 2013 when he granted that life-saving reprieve to mass murderer Nathan Dunlap, he said, I don't believe this is a matter for the legislature. I believe this is a matter for the voters of Colorado. So if the legislature wants to put a referred measure onto the ballot for Coloradans to vote on, heck, I'd be willing to support that conversation as well. But this isn't a matter for the legislature to pass a bill and then send to the governor's desk. He's already made it clear he won't sign it because he thinks it's for Coloradans.
The governor asked for a conversation, a statewide conversation on the death penalty. You're still up for that conversation, but you think it should happen on the ballot? Pretty
sure I'm the only person having that conversation at this point. I mean, since 2013 and past, it feels like every conversation about the death penalty either involves my jurisdiction, a case I've prosecuted, or me being willing to go out into the public, whether it's a retirement community, a breakfast club, lunch places, rotaries, and saying, let's have this conversation. I'm not only down for that conversation, I'm encouraging it. I even had a law review article published by the University of Denver Law Review on the death penalty within the last year.
I'm trying to think, if you're the last remaining DA in the state, whether it's due to philosophy or finances that's willing to do a death penalty case. Dan may have one coming up, I think, right, in El Paso?
I think that there is courage there and willingness by other DAs in the metro area, Denver excluded, to pursue the death penalty. And when I say Denver excluded, I'm not talking about Mitch Morrissey. I mean, he obviously pursued the death penalty as well. That would be willing to do it in the right case. I just think that Colorado's different than Georgia, Kentucky, Florida, Texas. We just don't do it willy-nilly. We try to find the right case.
How do we square the fact that you're the state's most prominent proponent of the death penalty and saying that there are some people that do not deserve that mercy, yet now you want to be publicly heard on the issue of public forgiveness for other convicts?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think the answer is that I'm not in the conviction, incarceration, death penalty business. I'm in the justice business. And justice is a very broad spectrum. Some cases that get filed need to be dismissed. Some cases need to be prosecuted very heavily. Some people deserve prison. Some people deserve probation. Some people deserve deferred judgments. Some people deserve the death penalty. Other people, at the end of their sentences for the things that they have done, some of those people have earned the right to be publicly forgiven. I don't think it's inconsistent at all. I think it is consistent with a job that demands justice.
One more spare question at the bottom of my page. Are you going to run for governor?
This is right here. We're just going to ask right here.
I wrote it down at the bottom.
Did you spell governor correctly?
I did,
There's some weird consonants in there. I'm giving it some serious thought. I think I've told everybody that. I'm not going to be coy about it. I'm seriously considering doing that. I just haven't made that decision yet.
What will be the determining factor?
I think a lot of things. One, I want to make sure that I can continue to do my job the way that the voters in my community have put me in a position to do it. I want to make sure that my family's still good with it. I want to make sure that it makes sense. I mean, look, you and I can sit here and talk about all the other names of people that might jump into this race that would have no impact on it at all. But if I wake up tomorrow morning and see that number 7 has decided to jump into this race with 100% name ID and maybe 110% positive name ID, I'd give that serious consideration about doing something differently. Short of that, I just want to make sure I've got everything lined up.
Okay, so you're saying that short of John Elway, there's not another name in the race that would keep you out, but there are those other factors.
Yeah, family first. It's a big deal to sign up a family for that. I'm just not sure if I'm that ambitious to do that, and if I am, is my wife willing to take that on? I mean, I've got 4 kids at home, 14, 12, 9, and just turned 7. That's tough. I still want to be a dad. I mean, I feel like I'm at best an average dad. Being in D.C. for that Senate thing, that wouldn't have made any sense. Being around the state, trying to figure out a way to make this the kind of state that they want to stay in and raise their families in and attract other people to come to, that's a big deal too. I want to continue to have that conversation with them.
Last question for real this time. Would it matter to you at all who the Democrats decide to put up if it looks like you might be putting your head into a wood chipper like the Ken Salazar machine?
No, not at all, unless John Elway announces a Democrat. But
okay.
No, there isn't anybody on that side.
All right, DA George Brauchler, thanks for your time.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure.